At Thanksgiving dinner, my sister stood up and announced, "We voted and you're not family anymore." Before we dive into the story, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to keep the stories flowing. I still remember the smell of roasted turkey filling the house that afternoon, the way it mingled with the sweetness of candied yams and the faint burn of something forgotten in the oven. It was Thanksgiving, but it didn't feel like gratitude had a place in that house anymore. The walls had soaked in too many arguments over the years, too many secrets whispered in the dark when they thought I couldn't hear. I'd driven 6 hours to get there, rehearsing small talk in my head the whole way, trying to convince myself this year would be different. The drive through the mountains had been beautiful, though. Golden leaves fluttering like coins in the wind, the low hum of my tires filling the silence. I'd told myself I was ready to face them again. My sister, Claire, my parents, the house I grew up in, now more like a museum than a home. Every mile felt like a slow rewind of my life, back to where everything had started to fall apart. When I pulled up the gravel driveway, I could see the flicker of warm light in the windows, silhouettes moving across the curtains. For a moment, it looked normal. But the pit in my stomach told me it wasn't. Claire met me at the door. She looked older than I remembered. Her hair cut short now, her lipstick too dark for her pale skin. "You made it," she said, her tone neutral, like she was checking attendance at a meeting. She hugged me, stiff and brief. Her perfume was sharp, citrusy, too strong, and when she stepped back, she didn't smile. "Hey, sis," I said, forcing one. "Long time." "Yeah, mom's in the kitchen. Dad's somewhere." She turned away before I could answer. The house felt smaller somehow. Or maybe I had just grown too big for it. The walls were cluttered with framed memories, graduations, birthdays, vacations, photos where we all looked happy before the fractures. I brushed my fingers along one picture of us as kids, me holding Claire's hand at the beach. I could almost hear the sound of the waves again, the gulls circling overhead, the laughter. It felt like a different lifetime. Mom's voice floated from the kitchen. "Is that you, Daniel?" "Yeah, Mom." "Come in here, honey. I need a hand with the potatoes." She still called me honey, even after everything. I followed her voice to the kitchen where she was elbow deep in pots and pans. The countertops were chaos, steam rising from boiling pots, half-prepared dishes scattered everywhere. Her apron was flour dusted and her hair frizzed from the heat. She turned, wiping her hands on a towel, and gave me that smile, the same one that used to make everything okay when I was a kid. For a moment, it almost worked. "You look good," she said. "A little tired, maybe. Long drive." "I bet." "Well, I'm glad you're here. It means a lot." I wanted to tell her it meant something to me too, but the words got caught somewhere behind the lump in my throat. Instead, I picked up a knife and started slicing carrots. Dad appeared a few minutes later, his usual silent entrance. He was dressed too formally for dinner, like he'd come straight from a board meeting. His silver hair was neatly combed, his expression unreadable. "Daniel," he said, like he was acknowledging a subordinate. "Dad, how's work?" "Fine. Good. Glad to hear it." That was the thing about my father. He never said anything outright, but the silence after his words always carried judgment. I could feel it pressing on me like static in the air. Dinner started tense, the way all family dinners do when there's history no one wants to mention. The clinking of cutlery filled the space between us. Claire had brought her husband, Ryan, and their two kids, who sat at the far end of the table. The kids were restless, tapping their feet, whispering too loud, the way kids do when they sense something wrong but don't understand it. Mom tried to keep conversation flowing. "So, Daniel," she said with forced cheer, "how's the new apartment?" "It's good. Quiet." "That's nice," she said. "Quiet is good." Claire's fork scraped against her plate. "Is that the one near the river? The one you bought after?" She didn't finish, but I knew what she meant. "After you left everything behind. After you ruined things." "Yeah," I said evenly. "That's the one." Ryan cleared his throat, trying to shift the mood. "Heard there's good fishing up there." "There is. Maybe I'll visit sometime." "Maybe." But Claire's eyes never left me. There was something in her expression, disgust, fear, pity. I couldn't tell. Only that it burned through me like a quiet accusation, The turkey was carved. Plates were passed around. The air grew heavy with heat, food, and unspoken things. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to fill the gaps. And then, somewhere between the cranberry sauce and dessert, Claire stood up. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, her wine glass trembling slightly in her hand. Mom looked up, confused. Dad frowned. "What is it, honey?" Mom asked. Claire took a deep breath. "I think we need to say something. Something we've all been avoiding." The room went still. "Claire," Dad said quietly, "this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," she said, her voice firm now. "We've been pretending long enough. I can't sit here and act like everything's normal when it's not." I felt my chest tighten. "What are you talking about?" She turned toward me. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned. "We voted," she said. "What?" "As a family, we talked about it and we voted." I looked around the table. No one met my eyes, not even Mom. "Voted on what?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Claire's voice broke slightly as she said it. "We voted. And you're not family anymore." The words didn't register at first. They just hung there, suspended in the air, impossible. My mind tried to reject them the way a body rejects poison. Mom covered her mouth. Dad looked down at his plate. Ryan put a hand on Claire's shoulder, as if steadying her. I laughed, because what else could I do? "That's funny, Claire. Real mature." But she didn't laugh. "I'm not joking, Daniel. What the hell are you talking about? You can't just vote someone out of a family. It's not just me, it's all of us. We agreed it's better this way." My chair scraped back as I stood. "Better for who?" "For everyone," Dad said quietly. "You know why, son." "No, I don't." "Why don't you enlighten me?" Mom's eyes were glassy. "Daniel, please don't make this harder." "Harder? You're telling me you all sat down, talked about me like I wasn't a person, and decided to, what? Erase me?" Claire's lip trembled. "After what you did, what choice did we have?" The room swayed. My pulse roared in my ears. "After what I did? I didn't do anything." "Stop lying," she shouted. "You always do this, always twist things until you're the victim." Ryan stood then, putting himself slightly between us. "That's enough." I stared at them all, faces I'd known my entire life, now strangers. "What did I do, Claire? Say it." She hesitated, looking at Mom. "Say it." Her voice cracked. "You know what you did to her." Silence. The kids had gone quiet, sensing the shift in the air. Mom was crying now, quietly, her shoulders shaking. Dad wouldn't look up. I felt like I'd been dropped into a dream, a nightmare that looked like my life but wasn't. My throat was dry. My hands shook. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered. Claire's eyes were full of something I couldn't name. "Then you're even worse than I thought." I turned, half expecting someone to stop me as I grabbed my coat, but no one did. The only sound was my heartbeat in my ears and the muffled sob of my mother. When I stepped outside, the cold hit me like a slap. The air was damp, the sky bruised purple. I stood there on the porch for a long time, staring at the dark outline of the trees. The laughter of my childhood echoed faintly in my head, warped and fading. For the first time in my life, I realized I didn't have a home anymore. And yet, beneath the shock, there was something else, a flicker of confusion. Because no matter how hard I searched my memory, I couldn't find anything that explained what they thought I'd done. Not to her, not to anyone. But that night, as I sat in my car, shaking hands, gripping the steering wheel, I started to wonder, what if there was something I didn't remember? I drove until the road vanished into darkness, until the line between sky and asphalt blurred into one endless stretch of nothing. The forest on either side pressed in, black silhouettes swaying under the dim wash of my headlights. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from that table, from their faces, from the words that didn't make sense no matter how many times I replayed them in my head. "We voted, and you're not family anymore." It sounded absurd, like something from a dream. But the thing about dreams is how real they can feel before you wake up. The rain started an hour into the drive. Light at first, then steady, drumming against the windshield like impatient fingers. The wipers smeared it into streaks, and the road became a mirror for the headlights of passing cars. Every few minutes, I'd catch my own reflection in the glass, pale, hollow eyed, like a stranger behind the wheel. I pulled into a gas station somewhere along Route 19, the kind of forgotten place where the neon flickers and the vending machine hums louder than the traffic. I filled the tank, bought coffee that tasted like burnt earth, and sat there with the engine idling, trying to steady my breathing. What did Claire mean? What I did to her? Who was her? Mom? Someone else? A memory scratched at the edge of my mind, like a voice from another room. But when I reached for it, it slipped away. I took out my phone and scrolled through old messages. The last one from Claire was over a year ago. Dad's in the hospital. You should call. I never did. That's when it hit me. Maybe this wasn't about one thing. Maybe it was everything. The fights, the distance, the things left unsaid. Maybe they'd finally just decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore. But that line, after what you did to her, it didn't sound metaphorical. It sounded like accusation, like something specific. I sat there until the rain eased into mist, the sky softening with the approach of dawn. A freight train groaned somewhere in the distance, its horn cutting through the fog. I decided to head home. Home, if you could call it that. A small two-bedroom apartment above an antique shop, where the floors creaked and the pipes moaned like ghosts in the walls. When I opened the door, the familiar chill greeted me. The air smelled faintly of paint thinner and coffee grounds. I tossed my keys onto the counter and collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come easy. When it finally did, it brought dreams. Blurred faces, water rising, a scream that sounded like my name. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. Unknown number. I answered before I could think. Hello? A pause, then a soft, trembling voice. Daniel? Yeah, who is this? It's, it's me, Emily. The name landed like a pebble dropped into deep water. I hadn't heard it in years. Emily, Claire's best friend in high school. The girl who used to spend summers with us by the lake. The one I hadn't thought about in forever. Emily? Wow, I heard what happened, she said, cutting me off. About Thanksgiving. How did you? Claire called me. I sat up. She called you? She said she finally told you. My pulse quickened. Told me what exactly? Another pause. I could hear her breathing, slow, shaky. You really don't know, do you? No, I don't. Daniel, maybe we shouldn't do this over the phone. Emily, please, what did she mean when she said what I did to her? There was a faint sound, like she was crying but trying to hide it. You should come see me, she said. I think you deserve to know the truth, but I can't tell you over the phone. Not like this. Emily, She hung up. The silence afterward was deafening. I sat there, staring at the phone, my heart hammering. The last time I'd seen Emily was the summer after college. The same summer everything with my family started to change. That summer, my father stopped speaking to me for reasons he wouldn't explain. Claire grew distant. And one night, something happened at the lake house. Something I could never quite piece together afterward. I'd woken up the next morning with a cut on my arm, a bruise on my temple, and no memory of how I'd gotten either. Everyone was gone when I woke, except for Claire, who wouldn't look at me. That was the last time I ever saw Emily. I didn't even know where she lived now, but the phone call stirred something in me. Curiosity mixed with dread. I found her on social media after a few searches. She lived 2 towns over, near Millfield. I told myself I just wanted answers. But underneath that, I think I already knew the truth would hurt. The drive to Millfield took less than an hour. The weather had cleared, but the air carried that sharp chill that hinted at snow. The town looked the same as it always had, small, quiet, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's story before they've even lived it. Emily's address led me to a small blue house at the end of a cul-de-sac. A porch swing creaked in the wind. The blinds were half drawn. I sat in the car for a few minutes before finally getting out. She opened the door before I could knock twice. Time had changed her. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with faint lines of gray near the roots. Her eyes, though, the same pale green I remembered, still carried that softness. But when she saw me, her face tightened, like she'd been bracing for it. Hi, I said. Hi. she echoed, voice barely above a whisper. We stood there in silence until she finally stepped aside. Come in. The living room was simple. Warm light, soft colors, photographs on every wall. I noticed one photo of her and Claire together, taken years ago. They looked happy, younger, untouched by whatever came after. She gestured for me to sit. I did. She didn't. I don't even know where to start, she said, wrapping her arms around herself. How about the beginning? She nodded slowly. The summer after college. You remember the lake house? Of course. You came up a week early. Claire told me you needed to get away for a while. Said you were having trouble sleeping. I frowned. That's true. I was going through some things back then. I came up the next weekend. It was supposed to be just us, me, Claire, you, and a few others. But that night, she stopped. Her hands were trembling. That night, something happened. What happened? Her eyes met mine, full of fear. Claire found me in the boathouse. I was crying. I told her that you. She swallowed hard. That you hurt me. The words hung there, fragile and terrible. I froze. What? She said she'd handle it. She made me promise not to tell anyone else. I was too scared. I just left. I shook my head, disbelief flooding through me. Emily, that's not. No, that's impossible. I would never. I know. Her voice cracked on those two words. I blinked. What do you mean? You know. I don't think you did it. The room tilted slightly. Then why would Claire say, because she thought you did? Because she found me like that and I couldn't remember. I was drunk, Daniel. We all were. I blacked out. When I woke up, I was hurt, confused. Claire blamed you because you were the only one missing from the cabin that night. My mind raced, images flickering like broken film. Fireflies outside, music from the radio, the smell of lake water and smoke. I remembered stumbling out of the cabin, late, dizzy, the world spinning. I'd gone to the dock to clear my head. Then, nothing. She said she confronted you, Emily continued softly. Said you denied it, got angry, and left. After that, no one ever spoke of it again. I felt sick. I didn't do it. I don't even remember leaving the cabin. I believe you, she said. But she doesn't. And your parents, well, she told them everything. They sided with her, they always did. The room felt too small, the air too thin. I stood up, pacing. Why didn't you tell them the truth? I tried, she said, tears welling. But by then, it was too late. She didn't want to hear it. None of them did. So they just decided I was guilty. She nodded. I pressed my palms to my face. My thoughts felt like shards of glass, sharp and scattered. But if she really thought I hurt you, I said slowly, then why reach out to you now? Why tell you about Thanksgiving? Emily hesitated. Because Claire's scared. She told me strange things have been happening lately. She said she's been getting letters, handwritten notes signed with your name. My stomach dropped. Letters? What kind of letters? She wouldn't show me, just said they were disturbing. Said they described things only someone at the lake house would know. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's insane. I haven't sent her anything. I believe you, she said again, her voice trembling. But someone wants her to think you did. A long silence settled between us. The wind rattled the window. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Do you still have her number? I asked. She blocked you, didn't she? Yeah. Emily reached for her phone. I can text her. Maybe she'll. Before she could finish, her phone buzzed with a new message. She looked down, and her face went pale. What? I asked. She turned the screen toward me. A message from an unknown number, just one line. He's lying to you, too. I stared at it, a chill crawling up my spine. Emily's hand shook. How would they know we're talking? I looked around the room, the window, the street outside. My heart pounded. Do you have security cameras? No. Anyone know I was coming here? No one. I moved to the window, peering out into the gray afternoon. The street was empty. Quiet. But somewhere beyond that stillness, I could feel someone watching. Maybe it's a prank, Emily whispered. Maybe, I said, though I didn't believe it. Because the message wasn't just a warning, it was familiar. The phrasing, the punctuation, even the rhythm of it. It sounded like something I'd written once before, years ago in an email to Claire during one of our last arguments. He's lying to you too. I hadn't written that line since 2016. Emily, I said slowly, do you still have those old photos from the lake house? The ones from that summer? She nodded. In the attic. Why? I need to see them. She led me up the narrow staircase to a small attic that smelled of cedar and dust. The single bulb flickered overhead. Boxes lined the walls, labeled in her careful handwriting. She dug through one marked Summer 13. I knelt beside her as she pulled out a stack of old photographs, edges curled with age. We spread them across the floor. There we were, me, Claire, Emily, a few friends. Sunlight on water, laughter frozen in time. Then one photo made my heart stop. It was the dock. The same night, everything had gone wrong. You could see me in the background, walking toward the boathouse, but in the foreground, barely visible, was another figure. A man standing in the shadows, watching. Who is that? I whispered. Emily squinted. I don't know. I've never noticed him before. The photo trembled in my hand, because as I looked closer, something cold and familiar crept over me. The shape of the shoulders, the tilt of the head, the faint scar along the jawline. It wasn't me, but it looked exactly like me. For a long time, I just stared at the photograph. The edges had yellowed, but the image itself was sharp enough to make my stomach turn. The water in the background was still, a mirror catching the faint glow of the moon. My younger self was half turned, blurry in motion as I walked toward the boathouse. And behind me, framed by darkness, stood a man with my face. Not just a resemblance. My face. Same jawline, same slope of the nose, even the small scar above my eyebrow from a bicycle crash when I was 12. Emily, I said quietly, this isn't possible. She took the picture from me, squinting. It could just be a trick of the light, or a reflection. It's not a reflection. Look at the shadows. He's facing me. Her brow furrowed. Then, who? I don't know. The bulb above us flickered again, humming faintly. I felt the attic closing in, the smell of dust and old wood pressing against my lungs. I set the photograph down carefully, like it might shatter if I touched it wrong. Can I take this? I asked. She hesitated. Yes, but be careful with it. I slipped it into my jacket pocket. Do you have any more from that night? No, that was the last one we took before. She didn't finish. I nodded. Okay. We went back downstairs in silence. The house felt different now, too quiet, every creak and sigh amplified. The air between us was thick with things neither of us wanted to name. At the door, she looked at me, her eyes glistening. Daniel, if you find out what really happened, will you tell me? I will, I said. I promise. Outside, the sky had turned slate gray. A light drizzle had started, misting the windshield as I climbed into my car. For a moment, I sat there, listening to the patter of rain on metal. My reflection wavered in the glass. My face superimposed over the street, faint and ghostly. The man in the photo, who was he? By the time I reached the main road, darkness had fallen again. The world blurred past in streaks of wet light. I couldn't stop thinking about the photograph, the angle, the distance, the look on that man's face. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't moving. He was watching. And if he wasn't me, then who was he watching for? At home, I spread the photo out on the kitchen table under the harsh light of a single bulb. I zoomed in on my phone camera, studying every pixel. The more I looked, the less sense it made. The clothes were the same kind I'd worn that summer, but something was off. The shirt pattern slightly different, the collar too high. There was one more detail. On his wrist, just barely visible beneath the sleeve, was a bracelet. Leather with a small silver clasp. I didn't own anything like that, but I remembered seeing one before. Claire used to wear one, until she gave it to someone. To me. Except I'd lost it years ago. I rubbed my temples, a headache blooming behind my eyes. I felt like I was chasing smoke. Maybe it was a trick of memory. Maybe the film got double exposed. But deep down, I didn't believe that. Something about it felt too deliberate. I tried calling Claire that night, even though I knew she wouldn't answer. The line rang once, then cut straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I barely slept. When I finally did drift off, I dreamed of the lake again, the smell of pine and gasoline from the old motorboat, the water black as oil. I was standing on the dock, watching a figure move through the trees. He stopped just at the edge of the light, and when he stepped forward, I saw his face. Mine. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The clock read 3:17 a.m. I couldn't shake the image. It wasn't fear exactly, it was recognition. The kind that crawls under your skin and won't leave. I got up, pulled on a hoodie, and sat at my desk. If the man in the photo wasn't me, I needed to know who he was. And if he was me, I needed to know why I didn't remember being there. I dug out an old hard drive from the drawer, the one that used to hold family photos, college pictures, random folders I hadn't opened in years. I plugged it in. The screen glowed pale blue as the files loaded. Folders named 2013 Lake Trip, Family Events, Graduation. I opened 2013 Lake Trip. Most of the photos were familiar, the same ones Emily had upstairs. But at the bottom of the folder, buried between duplicates, was a single video file. It was time-stamped July 14th, 2013, 1:22 a.m. I clicked play. Static first, then darkness. A flashlight beam cut through the night. The camera was shaky, moving fast, someone breathing hard behind it. Then a voice, Claire's. "Daniel, where are you?" She sounded frightened, desperate. The camera turned, catching flashes of trees, the dock, ripples on the lake. Then the lens steadied on the boathouse door. It was open. "Daniel, please come out," she said. The camera moved closer. The beam of light caught movement inside, a shadow crossing the frame. A man stepped out. I leaned closer, heart hammering. It was me. At least it looked like me. But something was wrong. His movements were off. Too stiff, too deliberate. His eyes reflected the flashlight, glassy and cold. He stopped a few feet from the camera. "Daniel," Claire whispered, voice trembling. "What are you doing?" The man tilted his head slightly like he didn't understand the question. Then the camera shook violently, fell sideways, and the image went black. I froze. The timestamp ended a few seconds later. My throat was dry. My pulse felt like it was echoing in my skull. That wasn't a memory. That was evidence. But evidence of what? I rewound it again, frame by frame, studying every flicker of light. The shape of his face, the slow blink, the strange tilt of the head. It was identical to me, but hollow, as if something was missing behind the eyes. The last frame before it cut out showed a reflection in the boathouse window. For a split second, two figures stood there, Claire holding the camera and behind her, another me. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath ragged. That's when the knocking started. 3 sharp raps at the door. I froze. The clock on the wall ticked toward 4. No one should have been there. I waited, barely breathing. Another knock, louder this time. I walked to the door, peered through the peephole. The porch light flickered in the wind, illuminating nothing but rain. I opened the door slowly. No one. The street was empty. The rain had turned to a fine mist curling through the light. But when I looked down, I saw it. An envelope on the doormat. No address. No stamp. Just my name, written in thin, slanted handwriting. I picked it up with trembling fingers and went back inside. The paper was damp, cold to the touch. I tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. The same image from Emily's attic, but this time, the figure in the background was closer, clearer. And behind him, standing at the window of the cabin, was my sister. Underneath the photo, a line was scrawled in black ink. "You should have stayed in the water." I dropped it, my hands shaking so hard I could barely breathe. For a moment, I thought I heard something, a faint creak from the hallway like footsteps. I turned, scanning the shadows. Nothing. But the air felt charged, the way it does before a storm. I didn't sleep at all after that. I sat on the couch until the first gray light of morning seeped through the blinds. The photo lay on the table, edges curling as it dried. I kept expecting someone to knock again. When the sun finally rose, I decided to go back to the lake house. I needed to see it, to remember. The drive took 2 hours. The road wound through forest and forgotten towns until the trees thinned and the lake appeared. Vast, still, a mirror reflecting the sky. The old house stood at the far edge, paint peeling, windows boarded over. No one had been here in years. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. The gravel crunched beneath my boots. I could smell damp wood, algae, and something faintly metallic. The boathouse was still there too, its door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. I stepped inside. Dust motes floated in the thin light that streamed through the cracks. The air was cool and wet, thick with the scent of mildew. Everything was where I remembered. The old workbench, the stack of paddles, the rope coiled in the corner, and then I saw it. Carved into the wooden beam above the door, Deep Sea Forever. I traced the letters with my fingers. I remembered carving that with Claire when we were kids. A childish promise that we'd always stick together, no matter what. I stood there for a long time, staring at those letters. Then something caught my eye. A faint shimmer in the water, just beneath the dock. I crouched down. There, wedged between the boards, was something metallic. I reached in, my hand cold as it brushed the surface, and pulled it out. A bracelet, leather, silver clasp. The same one from the photograph. It wasn't rusted or decayed. It looked new. That's when I heard the voice behind me. Daniel. I turned. Claire stood in the doorway. Her hair was soaked from the rain, her eyes rimmed red. She looked exhausted, haunted. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I thought you weren't speaking to me, I said quietly. I shouldn't be here, she said. But I knew you'd come. I held up the bracelet. This was yours. She nodded. It was. I found it in the water. I know. Her voice trembled. I threw it there. Why? She stepped closer. Because I didn't want him to have it. Who? She looked up at me, tears glinting in her eyes. The one who looks like you. The room spun slightly. Claire, I saw him again last night, she whispered. Outside my window. That's not possible. She shook her head, trembling. I got another letter too. It said he's coming back to finish what he started. I swallowed hard. Then who the hell is he? She took a shaky breath. I don't know, but he called himself Daniel too. The sound of the wind rose, rattling the boards. Somewhere beneath the dock, water sloshed softly. She stepped closer. There's something you need to see, she said. Something I buried. Buried? She nodded toward the trees. Behind the cabin, near the old fire pit. I followed her out into the rain. The air smelled of pine and soil. We stopped near the clearing where the ground was soft and dark. She knelt and brushed aside, leaves until her fingers hit something solid. A wooden box. She opened it. Inside were photos, letters, and my stomach dropped. An old ID card. It wasn't mine. The picture was my face, but the name read, David Cole. Claire looked at me, her voice breaking. That's him. The rain poured harder, cold against my skin. I stared at the photo, my mind spinning. The same face, different name. A twin. Or a double. Or something else entirely. The rain had slowed to a whisper by the time we made it back to the cabin, but everything felt soaked through, the air, the ground, even the silence. Water dripped from the porch roof in slow, rhythmic drops, each one echoing like a metronome in the heavy quiet. Claire set the wooden box on the old kitchen table. The boards creaked beneath our weight as if the house itself remembered what had happened here. Inside the box lay pieces of a life that didn't belong to me, yet felt disturbingly familiar. A driver's license, yellowed papers, an empty matchbook, and a few black and white photos folded at the corners. Each one showed the same man. My face again, but a colder version. A little older maybe, the gaze a little harder. I picked up the ID card. The laminate was cracked, the edges curling from age. David Cole. born 5 years before me. The address listed was one town over from where we'd grown up. Where did you get this? I asked. Claire didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced the edges of the box. It was Mom's, she said finally. After she After she started losing track of things, I went through her attic. I found it hidden behind the lining of one of her old suitcases. There were letters too, all signed D. At first I thought they were from you, but the handwriting, it wasn't yours. She handed me one of the letters. The paper was brittle, the ink faded to a rusty brown. The date at the top read May 1992. Dear M, it began. He doesn't know yet, does he? When he starts to look like me, you'll have to tell him. You promised. My eyes moved down the page, trying to take in the words, but the sentences blurred into one long tremor of unease. Who's M? I asked. Mom's name, Claire whispered. Margaret? I read the next line slowly. If anything happens to me, keep the records safe. They can't know there were two of us. I looked up at her. Two? She nodded. I didn't understand it either, but when I showed Dad, he burned the rest of the letters. The fire popped somewhere deep in the chimney, a phantom noise from the past. I could almost see our father standing there in his pressed shirt sleeves, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the flames. I thought it was about an affair, Claire said, her voice shaking. But when I found this ID, David Cole, I finished for her. Another version of me. She sat down, exhaustion overtaking her. Mom used to tell us those stories when we were kids, remember? About how you were sick when you were born, how you had to stay in the hospital for months. Yeah. She said the doctors did something unusual, some kind of treatment. I never understood what that meant. The pieces began clicking together, slow and reluctant, like old gears grinding into motion. What if, I said, that treatment wasn't just for me? What if there was another one, another child? Claire's voice was barely a whisper. A twin. I shook my head, trying to push it away, but the idea rooted itself in me. No one ever said anything. They wouldn't have. Dad would have buried it. He always said the family name had to stay clean. A gust of wind hit the cabin, rattling the windows. I stared down at the photo again. David Cole's expression seemed to shift under the flickering light. Something faintly smug at the corner of his mouth, a look that said, I know what you don't. I needed proof. Something more than paper ghosts and speculation. The hospital, I said. Mom's old stories, they always mentioned St. Catherine's, right? Claire nodded. If there were records, they'd be there. She hesitated. That place shut down years ago. All the better, I said. Less people to ask questions. The drive to St. Catherine's took most of the afternoon. The road wound through stretches of mist and pine, the gray sky pressed low enough to touch. The hospital sat on a hill outside town, abandoned and half collapsed, ivy crawling over the brick like veins. A rusted sign leaned sideways in the dirt. St. Catherine's Memorial, closed 2004. We parked near the gate. The air smelled of wet metal and old leaves. As we walked up the cracked path, our footsteps echoed against the empty buildings. Every window was a black square, watching. Inside, the hallways were lined with peeling paint. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, rhythmic beats. A few broken wheelchairs lay overturned in the corners. The sound of our breathing filled the space like a low tide. This is insane, Claire muttered. We shouldn't be here. Just a few minutes, I said. If the records survived, they'd be in the basement archives. We found the stairwell half buried in debris. I pushed the door open and the smell hit us. Dust, mold, and something old enough to have forgotten what it once was. The flashlight beam cut through the dark, catching fragments of paper fluttering from broken cabinets. Rows of old file boxes lined the walls, their labels faded beyond recognition. I pulled one open, scanning the folders. Neonatal, 1989, my birth year. Here, I said. Claire stood beside me, holding the light. I flipped through the names, Campbell, Carter, Cole. There it was. Caldwell, Daniel, and beneath it, another. Caldwell, David. My throat went dry. 2 files, side by side, same last name, same date of birth. Claire covered her mouth. Oh my God. I opened the first. Standard birth record, weight, blood type, mother's name. Healthy male infant, complications at birth, transferred to research wing for observation. The second file was thinner. The first page had a red stamp across it. Terminated, do not release information. There was a note clipped to the top. Subject D, non-viable. Record sealed by order of Dr. Henry Caldwell. I stared at the name. Dr. Caldwell, our father. Claire swayed, gripping the edge of the shelf. He worked here before you were born. Daniel, he must have been part of whatever this was. My hands shook as I turned the pages. A few medical photos were still inside. Scans, handwritten notes, a grainy image of two infants in identical incubators. Someone had scrawled a line across the bottom margin. Only one to survive. But there was another entry, dated months later, that chilled me more than the rest. Subject D removed from facility. Location classified. Claire read over my shoulder, whispering, removed? How can someone non-viable be removed? The light flickered, the battery dying. Shadows stretched long and strange across the walls. The air felt charged again, the way it had at home before the knocking. I heard a sound then, something soft but deliberate from the far end of the corridor, a slow drag of feet across concrete. Did you hear that? Claire's voice trembled. Stay behind me, I said. The beam of the flashlight swung toward the noise, catching only dust swirling in the air. The sound stopped. Then a faint breath, close enough that I could almost feel it on the back of my neck. I turned, heart pounding. Nothing, just darkness. We need to go, Claire said. We left the files spread open on the table and made for the stairs. As I reached the door, I glanced back one last time and saw it. On the wall, faint but fresh, someone had traced a word into the dust with their finger. Home. We didn't stop driving until the hospital was a blur behind us, and the first hints of evening light began to stretch across the road. Neither of us spoke. The silence in the car was thick with the same question turning over and over in both our minds. If David was removed from that facility, where had he gone? When we finally reached the highway, Claire whispered, Do you think he's still alive? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The image of the man in the photo filled my mind. The same eyes, the same scar, the same breathless stillness in the dark. If he was alive, he'd had a whole lifetime to become whoever he wanted. And if he wasn't, then something else wearing his face had come back in his place. Night came down hard and fast on the drive back. The headlights carved narrow tunnels through the fog, and every tree along the road looked like it might move when I wasn't looking. Neither of us spoke until the old Caldwell house appeared over the hill, its windows glowing faintly with the orange pulse of a single lamp. Dad's lamp, the one he always left burning in his study, like a lighthouse for guilt. We parked in silence. The engine ticked as it cooled, and the air smelled faintly of pine and rain. Claire looked at me, her eyes hollowed out from the day's discoveries. He's going to lie, she said. I know, I replied, my hand already on the door. But I need to hear the lie first. The study hadn't changed. Books still crowded the shelves, the same medical certificates framed in a neat row. Dad sat at his desk, gray now, smaller somehow, his posture folded inward like an apology that had taken human form. He didn't look surprised when we entered. I wondered when you'd come, he said softly. Claire's voice broke the air. We know about David. The name hung there like smoke. Dad's eyes flickered, but he didn't deny it. He just leaned back, fingers steepled, the faintest tremor in his voice when he spoke. It was a research project. Your mother was desperate to save you, Daniel. You were dying. There was a clinical trial, replication therapy. The idea was to grow compatible tissue using a mirrored embryo. A backup, they called it. He paused, breathing shallow. But it worked too well. You both survived. Claire's hands flew to her mouth. I felt the room tilt. So you had another son, I said. He nodded once. We couldn't keep both. There were legal risks, ethical concerns. The sponsors wanted silence. I arranged for David to be transferred. Transferred where? I demanded. He hesitated. To another family. They promised to raise him quietly, but years later, there was an accident at the facility that kept his records. I thought he was gone. I thought it was over. I stepped closer, the floor creaking beneath me. And if it isn't over? His eyes met mine, tired but sharp. Then he found you first. The sound of wind pushed against the windows, and for a moment it felt like the walls themselves were listening. Claire began to cry quietly. Dad turned his gaze toward the lamp, its glow trembling in the reflection of his glasses. I didn't mean for any of this, he said. I just wanted one of you to live. That was the last thing he said before the light flickered, and a shape moved outside the window. Just a blur, but enough to send every nerve in my body into flame. When I looked again, the yard was empty, and the only thing left was a faint handprint on the glass, identical to mine. As the night settled in, I couldn't stop thinking about the line that divided us, the choices made in quiet laboratories, the secrets buried under family dinners and polite silences. I wondered if any of us were ever meant to find out, or if some truth should remain half buried like the box in the woods. If you looked into your own past and found another version of yourself waiting there in the dark, would you want to meet them? And if you did, how sure could you be that you'd still be the one who walked away?